She says, باب المرأة تنتقل من منزلها قبل انقضاء عدتها من موت أو طلاق. So as a woman moving from her house before the expiry of her iddah arising from death or from divorce. So he says, أخبرنا مالك. So this book, Mahir, was actually written for that very reason. Not this book, sorry. Shah Waliullah Dahlawi, he experienced what your father has experienced. And he said, like these people of Indo-Pak are a bit like that. They're kind of sectarian. And so I'm going to use the Muwatta of Imam Malik, not this narration, but the original Muwatta of Imam Malik. I'm going to pepper it with some verses of the Quran, and it's going to be not a book for do ijtihad, but it helped them understand. So what he did is he said, this is because like the average Muslim in Indo-Pak doesn't follow the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They follow like it's almost like a church because they don't read the hadith because they're not encouraged to read the hadith. They don't read the Quran and they don't read the hadith. So what he did, Shaykh Allah Dahlawi, is he made this book. It's called Musawwa, I think Musawwa, right? Which he got the Muwatta, he changed the order a little bit, and then he added some verses of the Quran a little bit. So it gives like this picture of like, oh, we could look at this in this way and look at this in this way, right? And he mentions the Shafi school, the Maliki school, and the Hanafi school, right? It's quite nice. And he did the same thing with the Quran. He actually translated the Quran into Farsi, Shahla Wali Allah Dahlawi, for that same reason, so that you actually feel like you're reading Revelation. You can the awam, the average person who can read in Indo-Pak, presumably like their official language being Farsi, can actually read something, as opposed to, your religion is always secondhand. So that's one of the nice things about being Ahl Hadith or Salafi, is you don't feel your religion is secondhand. You feel like you're connecting directly, right? It's a nice feeling, right? The problem is your connection is often off, but it's a nice feeling. And so there's no harm in creating that feeling. Like just reading Quran and Hadith is very important. Okay. So he says أخبرنا مالك أخبرني يحيى بن سعيد أي صارف عن القاسم ابن محمد. Where is Muhammad? Is he gone? He's going to come back. وسليمان بن يسار أنه سمعهما يذكران أن يحيى بن سعيد العاص طلق بنت عبد الرحمن بن الحكم البتة فان- فانتقلها فانتقلها عبد الرحمن فأرسلت عائشة إلى مروان وهو أمير المدينة: اتقوا الله واردد المرأة إلى بيتها. فقال مروان في حديث سليمان: إن عبد الرحمن غلبني. وقال في حديث القاسم: أو ما بلغك شأن فاطمة فاطمة بنت قيس. قالت عائشة: لا يضرك ألا تذكر حديث فاطمة. قال مروان: إن كان بك إن كان بك الشر فحسبك ما بين هذين من الشر. Uh, if you could help us, who is Muhammad ibn Qasim or Qasim ibn Muhammad? Sorry, can you remind us who this
I'm
person is?
sorry, sorry. Qasim ibn
Muhammad.
Muhammad,
Qasim ibn
uh,
Muhammad. Who is Qasim ibn Muhammad?
Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr.
Abu Bakr, yes. So tell me who he is, and
He's
two things we learn about
yeah,
him. Mhm.
he's the grandson of Sayyidina Abu Bakr.
Correct. Yes. So,
He
so his
his sorry.
yeah, his father Muhammad. Who is so this? His father Muhammad is therefore the son of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, right?
Yes,
And
he was
who's the
brought up
mother of
by
Muhammad?
was it Fatima? It was
Asma bint Umais, and she was originally the wife of
um, I can't
Sayyidina.
remember, but I know that he was brought up by Sayyidina Ali.
Good.
Was
So
he?
so Asma bint Umais was married to Sayyidina Ja'far. Sayyidina Ja'far was
Yeah.
martyred in Jordan. He dies shaheed. Then she marries Sayyidina Abu Bakr. Sayyidina Abu Bakr is killed. Then she married Sayyidina Ali, right? So, first point, the Sahabiyat had marital mobility, meaning they got married and then got married and then got married. They didn't just stop and die, right? They had this mobility. They got married, divorced, got married, divorced, got married, divorced, or married, the husband dies, married again, right? So here is Asma bint Umais married to three of the Sahaba, right? That's number one. Okay, so then her third husband, Sayyidina Ali, raises Muhammad, okay, and since Sayyidina Ali becomes the Khalifa and he raises him. So now, is there enmity according to the Shia? Is there an issue between Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Abu Bakr according to the Shia?
Yeah.
Yes. So why would you raise the son of your enemy? It doesn't make any
You
sense.
wouldn't.
It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah.
So now, Qasim, so Muhammad is basically the son of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and basically the son of Sayyidina Ali. He is with Sayyidina Ali at Siffin, I believe, or Jamal, one of the two battles. He is sent to Egypt as a governor for Sayyidina Ali, okay, and is killed in Egypt, okay, and his son Al Qasim is sent to go and study with his aunt. And who is his aunt?
Is it Sayyidatuna Aisha?
Then Aisha radiallahu anha, right? So
Radiallahu
now,
anha.
what is this book doing? This book is quoting the fatwa of Qasim, right? So the Maliki school that is based on Amal Ahmadina, i.e. people like this, right? So here's a mufti who's going to be in Medina, who grew up in the house of Aisha, who is kind of effectively the grandson of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and kind of the grandson of Sayyidina Ali, but raised by the faqiha and the scholar Aisha radiallahu anha, right? And then Imam Malik is going to study with his son Abdurrahman, right? So this is Imam Malik. One of Imam Malik's many teachers is Abdurrahman, the great grandson of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, who and his father was raised in the house of Aisha. So the fiqh of Aisha is with Qasim, right? So when you say Maliki school, you mean the Aisha school to some extent. That's what we're saying, right? And so there's many things. The Shia issue there, marital mobility, which is very important. Again, Indo-Pak, right? Why would you not get married in Indo-Pak? Because if you have a divorce, your life is over. Is that correct, Mahir?
Could you repeat that last part?
So in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, and India, right, a woman cannot be married more than once. Usually, what's going to happen is if she got married and she got divorced, it's a disgrace to her family and it's a disgrace to her name. Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of. I
Right?
would say.
And so she would be happy. She'd rather not get married or get married and stay in an abusive marriage and be beaten up and whatever and deal with anything because of it would be so bad if she got married. She could have got divorced because basically her life would be over.
Yes, that's true. It's a
Right?
big problem.
So as opposed to the Sahabiyat, they got divorced, they got remarried. The husbands died, they got remarried. That's there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you're not a
Yeah.
virgin, you can't get married. Which of the Prophet's wives was a virgin? One of them, right? So there's subhanAllah, whenever you read hadith, every single hadith has a story that tells you about a world that is lost, we've lost, right? You know? And it's very important. These key things. Here's, if you met Asma bint Umays and you interviewed her today, she'll be so different to the religious women of our time, right? Very different. Aisha radiallahu anha, yes, she's behind a veil. She's not on camera. She's not on YouTube, but she has opinions. She goes to war against Sayyidina Ali. So our concept of powerful women, our concept of what it means to be out there is just off. They were stronger women than our women today, more prominent, more significant, but in a better way. They didn't use their bodies, they didn't use their voices, they didn't do things like that. They used other things, but they did have rights and they did have presence in society, right? As opposed to women should be silenced. They shouldn't be in society, right? Um, so it's not like that. Okay. So anyway, so here we see. So it says Yahya ibn Sa'id, this is Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, the Qadi of Medina. He informed us that he heard both Al-Qasim Muhammad, these great muftis of Medina, and Sulaiman ibn Yasar, another mufti of Medina, narrating that Yahya ibn Sa'id al-As divorced his daughter, right? The daughter of Abdurrahman ibn al-Hakam, irrevocably, al-Batta, right? Threefold divorce. And so Abdurrahman made her move house, okay? Which you can't do, right? Aisha sent a message to Marwan. So Marwan, this is Marwan al-Hakam, who would one day become the Khalifa, but at this point he's just a governor. He's just an Umayyad governor of Medina. Okay, Marwan ibn Hakam. So who was the Emir of Medina at that time, and she said, have taqwa of Allah, fear Allah. So she's not saying I'm a woman, I can't talk. She says I'm a scholar and I'm obliged to talk. This is haram, right? And return the woman back to house. You can't do that. A divorced woman, she stays in the house, the man leaves. So Marwan said, in the hadith of Sulaiman, according to one shah, Abdurrahman overcame me. Like I can't he's just like he so here this Abdurrahman here, he's basically telling me what to do and I don't know what to do about it. And the other version it says has the business of Fatima bint Qais. Who is this? Yeah, this is Fatima. So there's another hadith not reached you. Aisha said, it would do you no harm not to mention the hadith of Fatima. You don't need to even talk about that. Right? Marwan said, if it is evil to you, then the evil between these two is sufficient evil for you. Right? I don't understand the whole concept here, but there's basically another precedent that he's referring to. قال محمد بهذا نأخذ لا ينبغي للمرأة أن تنتقل من منزلها الذي طلقها فيه زوجها طلاقا بائنا أو غيره أو مات عنها فيه حتى تنقضي عدتها وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا, right? So whatever debate that was happening there with Marwan, he's like actually saying, no, that is not what we're going to do. A woman cannot leave the house. So Imam Muhammad said we adhere to this hadith, to this quote. A woman ought not move from her dwelling in which her husband divorced her, with a divorce in which there is no return except through a new proposal. This is not correct translation. This is a bit. I think this phrase here, except through a new proposal, this is not correct at all. There's just a clear typo or something like that. Just trying to find a pencil. No, it doesn't say that. It says anyway. So it says, uh, uh, so it says a woman ought not move from her dwelling in which her husband divorced her, in which there is no return, except through a new proposal. This is totally wrong. That's not what it says at all. What it says is, uh, ألا طلق فيه زوجها طلاقا بائنا أو غيره. So whether it's a a complete divorce or a temporary divorce, a divorce, a revocable divorce, or other type of divorce. So this here, except to a new proposal, this is a mistake. This is not even in the text at all. It's not even a translation. It's probably just a typo. Like it came from the wrong place, or in which her husband has died until her iddah has finished, right? So, unless, for example, there's something psychological issues because she can't stay there in the house is falling down, it's not safe. She's in the middle of nowhere. He lives in the middle of nowhere, and she's now by herself totally. There's no access to money. There's no safety. There's whatever kind of issues like that. But the default, she has to stay in that place. That is the position of Imam Abu Hanifa and our fuqaha in general, right? And so Mahir, we've spoken about this at length and just introducing to the idea that a madhab began with Imam Abu Hanifa is wrong, or that a madhab began with Imam Malik is wrong. Rather, there is a proto madhab. So here, Imam Muhammad, he says this is the position of Imam Abu Hanifa and our fuqaha in general, i.e., the Kufans. So the Kufan school is the prototype of the Hanafi school. So the Hanafi school precedes, right, Imam Abu Hanifa. It is called the Hanafi school after him as a laqab, as a term, as a concept, but it is not him. Just like the theory of relativity precedes Einstein, but we call it Einstein's theory of relativity because he's the one who kind of put the final, pieces there. But he didn't invent it. It's not him, right? So we call it the Hanafi school, even though the Hanafi school predates Imam Abu Hanifa and is far bigger than Imam Abu Hanifa. So it neither began nor started with him. So this is again problem with Ahl Hadith Salafi. Why would I follow the Hanafi school if Imam Abu Hanifa didn't know anything? The answer is the Hanafi school is not Imam Abu Hanifa. Oh, okay. So the Hanafi school precedes Imam Abu Hanifa and continues after Imam Abu Hanifa. So the Hanafi that's just a title, right? The Medinan school of fiqh exists. Imam Malik is a key person of that, right? And then it continues. So the Maliki school neither began with Imam Malik nor did it end with him. So my discussion is not with Imam Malik anyway. What Imam Malik knew or what he didn't know, that's fairly irrelevant, right? So this is again analogous somewhat to say, for example, you know, why are you reciting the Quran according to one city in Iraq? Like, what are you talking about? Well, you recite Hafs and Asim, right? Hafs and Asim. That's Hafs is one huge Qari, right? From Kufa. Like, why are you reciting in that particular way? I don't know. So the answer is
Um,
The
oh,
answer is
sorry.
that Hafs and Asim is a specialized, accurate, and defined codification of how the Kufans, as a collectivity, as a group of scholars, narrated the Quran from the Sahaba, from the Tabi'in and Sahaba back to the Prophet ﷺ, right? So therefore, it's something that's mutawatir and useful, and it's merely codified and organized by Hafs. So, to some extent, Hafs is to the Kufan recital of the Quran what Imam Abu Hanifa is to the Kufan fiqh. And so I'm not following Hafs. I'm not reciting Hafs Quran. I'm reciting the Kufan Quran, which is a large body of people and therefore it's mutawatir, therefore it's useful. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a difference between an inventor and a codifier. An inventor is your idea. Codifier, you would just put it all together for somebody else. And then we put your name on it, right? Like, designed in Sweden, put together in China. So, okay, so, but it's bigger than that, right? So here, when you see these little words here, what وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا means this fatwa is not Imam Abu Hanifa's fatwa, nor is it Imam Muhammad's fatwa. There is already a large body of people who are saying this, right? By this time, there's already a large body of people. It already has not precedent of a fatwa of one Sahaba, two Sahaba. It's like a large body. There's already a madhab. There's already a Kufan madhab before the Hanafi school is called the Hanafi school. In reality, also they refer to Imam Hanifa as al-Kufi. Say Qala al-Kufi. The Kufan said this because he represents a system. Okay? So when you see these things, and so Imam Malik will also use this word as well. Imam Malik will say, "Wala amalu عندنا كذا." So what we do is this. What do you mean? What we do? Who is we? It means the fuqaha of Medina. So when you're looking at the Maliki school, it's not Imam Malik. So this is how some people perceive it. Imam Malik knew Hadith and Quran very well. Imam Malik came to this conclusion. That's not what is happening. Imam Malik is not just looking at the Quran and Sunnah. Imam Malik is looking at the Quran and Sunnah and he's editing these series of fatwa that he's heard from generation after generation after generation of Medinan scholars. And he has a particular reason why Medina is more authentic. Their fatwa is more authentic than anywhere else, right? So Imam Abu Hanifa, similar kind of thing, right? He's not limited to Kufa, but he sees the Kufans as the greatest scholars. He's seen the Medinans, he's seen the Meccans, etc., seen other people, but these are the best fuqaha, and he's organizing these discussions and refining them, giving an actual answer, and comparing it with the Meccans, comparing it with other people as well. But the idea that somebody comes along and just reads Quran and Sunnah in a vacuum, like they're not looking at what the Sahaba and Tabi'een did, right? Or they're not being trained by somebody else, this doesn't exist, right? This doesn't exist. Nobody's doing that. So somebody's like, oh yeah, I just read Quran and Sunnah. Nobody did that. Everybody was trained in a large pre-existing system. So, i.e., the whole we talked about last time, the civilization, that wasn't right. Civilization, like so, civilization's already happening by this time, right? By this time, you already have the Kufan grammarians and the Basran grammarians. So there's already a school of thought of grammar, a school of thought of this, a school of thought of that, right? It's not just one person or two people. It's already happening. Okay. So أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا نافع أن ابنة سعيد بن زيد بن نفيل طلقت البتة فانتقلت فأنكر ذلك عليها ابن عمر. So Imam Malik said that Nafi', the freed slave of Ibn Umar, so again, concept Mahir, this is a concept I'm repeating. The slave of Ibn Umar has more fiqh than the son of Ibn Umar. So we see Malik from Nafi' from Ibn Umar more than we see Malik narrating from Salim from Ibn Umar. So that tells us about slavery, right? So again, we live in a world where there's no slavery. And when we think about slaves, we think about ancient Egypt, think about America, we think about it's like it's not a thing, right? Whereas slavery existed in Islam and slaves were part of the family and slaves had knowledge and slaves were taught and slaves were muftis and slaves were scholars, etc. Right? It's a very different picture. So here, Nafi', the freed slave of Ibn Umar, is more knowledgeable than Salim, his his son. Informed us that the daughter of Sa'id ibn Zayd ibn Nufail. Go ahead, Mahdi, you had a question?
So, I was wondering, how did you figure out that the Nafi radiallahu anhu, he had more knowledge than Ibn Umar?
So we see if you look in the Muwatta, you see Malik from Nafi' from Ibn Umar. You see it way more than you see Nafi' from Salim from Ibn Umar. It comes up so much more.
So,
It's, it's called the golden chain in Hadith, right? So the golden chain in Hadith is when Imam Malik narrates from Nafi' from Ibn Umar. It's like the strongest Sahih chain you could have.
whoa. And
Yeah,
Saleh was the son of Ibn Umar.
Salim.
Salim.
So he
Okay.
comes. You see Salim now and then. You will see him, but not as much as you see Nafi'.
Hmm.
Not as much
I
at all,
see.
right? Ikrimah as well. Ikrimah from Ibn Abbas, freed slave of freed slave of Ibn Abbas. Makhul Ashami, one of the great fuqaha. Makhul, slave. He was a captive from Kabul when the Muslims conquered Kabul, right? Hassan al-Basri, his mother was a
Mhm.
slave, right? So you see, if slavery was so bad in the Ummah of Muhammad and they were so abused and raped and killed and all these horrible things, why did their sons or why did they and their sons become scholars? Right. So
Yeah.
imagine the Muslims, horrible Arabs, they come into Central Asia and they conquer Kabul, right? And then they took him as a slave to Damascus, and he's raised in Damascus, and he becomes the Mufti of Damascus. How is that possible? Did that happen in America? Did you see, for example, black slaves in America? They became presidents and politicians and governors? No, they're treated like dirt. They're treated like worse than animals. That's how they're treated. Whereas in Islam, it's not like that. So there's a hadith, I believe is weak, narrated by Imam Shafi, that he said the tie between a slave and master is like the tie of the womb. It's like family, right? It's family, right? In the Old Testament, when Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he's told that he has a covenant, right, and they have to circumcise their sons, it says you have to circumcise your boys and the boys that you buy. Meaning, when you go and buy a slave and he's now part of your tribe, he's now part of Bani Israel as well. And he also has to be circumcised because your slave is part of your family, right? A woman owns you and sets you free, okay? and you die with no family, she inherits from you because she is considered your family, right? You're a female and you were set free by a man. Now you want to get married, he marries you off because he's your family, right? That's what it meant. Is you're part of a tribe, you're part of a system, as opposed to you're worse than an animal, right? And we see that here. And again, every single hadith is a story. It's not just a story; it's a civilization, right? Every single narrator is a story or a civilization, right? And again, even imagine this, for example, right? Imagine a man's wife cheats on him. Okay, so what would you do if your wife cheats on you? Kill her, kick her out of the house, never talk to her again, right? Islam says, eh, I mean, if you know she cheated on you, you can do li'an, but you can't just go and kill her. That's number one. And number two, you can't kick her out of the house. So you're saying she cheated on me, and I have to leave the house. So yeah, because you have to look after the weak. You have to look after the weak. The woman is weak. You have to look after her. Subhanallah, right? So this is a civilization. It's like how we look at things, and how the deen looks at things. Every single thing, subhanAllah, is a huge ibrah, a huge lesson in it, in a name, in a place, in a this and that, etc. فأنكر ذلك عليه Ibn Umar. So we mentioned that the Maliki school is the school of Aisha. It's also the school of Ibn Umar. Half of the Maliki school is just Ibn Umar, right? You have a problem with the Maliki school, you have a problem with Ibn Umar. You say, oh, this is bid'ah, right? Ibn Umar does bid'ah? Really? So Malik informed us that Nafi' informed us from Sa'id ibn Zayd from the divorce irrevocably, and she moved house. Ibn Umar objected to her behavior, so you can't do that. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا سعد بن إسحاق بن كعب بن عجرة عن عمته زينب ابنة كعب بن عجرة أن فريعة بنت مالك بن سنان وهي أخت أبي سعيد الخدري أخبرته أنها excuse me أتت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم تسأله أن ترجع إلى أهلها في بني خدرة فإن زوجي خرج في طلب أعبد له أبقوا حتى إذا كان بطرف القدوم أدركهم فقتلوه فقالت فسألت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يأذن لي أن أرجع إلى أهلي في بني خدرة فإن زوجي لم يتركني في مسكن يملكه ولا نفقة فقال نعم فخرجت حتى إذا كنت بالحجرة دعاني أو أمرني من دعاني فدعيت له فقال كيف قلت فرددت عليه القصة التي ذكرت له فقال امكثي في بيتك حتى يبلغ الكتاب أجله قالت فاعتددت فيه 4 أشهر و10 قالت فلما كان أمر عثمان أرسل إلي فسألني عن ذلك فأخبرته بذلك فاتبعه وقضى به. So again, significance of women. Right? So Malik informed us from Sa'id ibn Ishaq from Ka'ab ibn Ka'ab ibn Ujrata, who informed us from his paternal aunt. Right, so the chain transmission goes through women. Zainab bint Ka'ab ibn Ujra, that Furay'a bint Malik ibn Sinan, who was the sister of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, told him that she came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to ask him to be allowed to return to her family in Bani Khudra. I need to go back to my tribe because why? Because my husband had gone out to look for some slaves of his who had fled. Then when he was on the track leading to Al-Qadum, he caught up with them and they killed him. Right, so were all slaves very happy and nice? No, right. So here we go. He was looking for his slaves that he owned, and they ran away, and they had killed him. So my husband's dead. She said, so I asked the Messenger of Allah to give me permission to return to my family among Bani Khudra, because my husband did not leave me in a house which he owned. We were renting the house, nor any maintenance. He said yes, so I went. When I was in the courtyard, he called me or told someone to call me, and I was summoned to him. He said, "What did you just say?" She said, "I repeated him to the story that I mentioned, and he said to me, he said, stay in your house until the appointed period reaches its term, i.e., 4 months and 10 days. She said, I performed the iddah for 4 months and 10 days, and then later in the emirate, during the time of Sayyidina Uthman, he sent for me and asked me about it, and I told him about it. So again, here is a judge relying on this narration of a woman, and he followed it and he gave judgment by it, right? So this is the case, right? So there must be more details here, right? There must be more details here because obviously, if she has no money, what she can do is starve. You know, if she's staying in a house and she has no money, and the landlord is saying, "Please pay me," then is he obliged to suffer for 4 months and 10 days because of her? No, right? So there has to be more details here, right? So أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا يحيى بن سعيد عن ابن مسيب. So this is Malik from the Qadi of Medina, Yahya ibn Sa'id, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, from another Mufti of Medina, Sa'id al-Musayyib, who is the son-in-law of Abu Huraira, right? This is the son-in-law, and this is the great. So he is to the Malikis and the Shafi'is what Ibrahim al-Nakha'i is to the Hanafis. So many of the key fatwa that we find in the Maliki and Shafi school are based on the fatwa of Ibn Sa'id al-Musayyib. Whereas many of the fatwa we find in the Hanafi school are based on Ibrahim al-Nakhai. So these are these kind of two key people at a certain time in the history of Islamic fiqh, Sa'id al-Musayyib and Ibrahim al-Nakhai. So Ibrahim al-Nakhai, one of the key builders of the Hanafi school, a teacher of the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa, and Sa'id al-Musayyib, a key builder of the Maliki and Shafi schools, the teacher of the teacher of Imam Malik. Go ahead, Maher.
Yeah, so regarding the last hadith, I was wondering why did Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam like again call her back and change the ruling?
I
Is
don't know. Maybe he had made a mistake. Or maybe he had misunderstood something and he was double checking. He had misheard something. Allahu A'lam. I don't know.
okay,
No.
I see.
عن المسيب أنه سئل عن المرأة يطلقها زوجها وهي في بيت بكراء, right? In Urdu say karaya, right? Like uh, that's you speak Urdu, Maher, right? No, you speak Bangla. Sorry, my mistake. But do you say karaya in Bangla?
Hiraya, yeah, you mean? Oh yes,
Like
Bahra,
that's
rent.
rent, yeah? So this is this word
Yeah,
kara.
but like,
So in Arabic,
it,
akra yukri means to rent something out. So this is kara. This is where it comes from, al kara, right? So she a house on rent. قال على زوجها, right? So she's been divorced. He has to leave. So he's now going to rent somewhere else, but he also has to rent the house that she's in, right? So he's going to pay two rents, or he's going to go and stay with his family, right? قالوا فإن لم يكن عند زوجها قال فعليها, then she has to pay. قالوا فإن لم يكن عندها فقال على الأمير, right? So Malik informed us, so Yahya ibn Sa'id informed us from Ibn al-Musayyib that he was asked about a woman whose husband divorces her and she is in a rented house. Who is responsible for the rent? He answered, her husband, right? So the food and is another issue, but rent that he's supposed to be, she stays in that house, right? So for the structure of society and for the benefit of the husband and for the benefit of the wife, right? And for the benefit of any future children, she stays in one place because then nobody says anything. Everybody knows she was divorced, she stayed in one place. If she gives birth now, it is her previous husband's child. Done, clear, right? So that has to happen. So she can't leave. So now who has to pay the rent? He has to pay the rent. قال على زوجها. Okay? Her husband. They asked, what if he hasn't got it, hasn't got any money to pay? Okay. He answered, then it is then it's her responsibility. Right? It has to happen. They asked, but then she can go back to him, right? So that's not in the hadith. Right? So she has to stay in the house. She has cash. He doesn't have cash. She's going to pay the rent, but that money is so that's like a woman, for example, a woman who is being supported by her husband, right? And then her husband didn't support her for some time. So she paid for herself. That's a debt, right? So there's a difference between money that you owe your children and money that you owe your wife. So you don't owe your children money. So you didn't feed your children for 10 years. You come back after 10 years and say, I'm sorry, guys, I didn't support you. They're like, okay, sorry. You pay your children. You don't owe your children any money. You do owe your wife money though. Your wife paid. She worked and she paid out of her own pocket. You do owe her money because the 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 relationship between your children and you is not a hard relationship. The relationship with your wife, it is a hard relationship, meaning there are financial rights involved. Right? There are financial rights. Like she's not obliged to support herself. So until the iddah is over, you are obliged to do that. So the point is she cannot leave and she has cash. So she's going to pay and then she's going to come back to you tomorrow and say, hey, you owe me money, by the way. Right? You owe me that for that time. So she has to pay that, but it doesn't mean that she doesn't, um, it doesn't mean that she doesn't can't come back to you and get the money. That makes sense. Um, They asked, what if she doesn't have it? He answered, then it's responsibility of the mir, i.e. the Bayt al-Mal, right? So she's considered faqir and that's it, right? So the point is she doesn't leave, right? Okay, what if there's no Bayt al-Mal, right? Or what if that can't be done in time? Okay, then she's going to have to leave, right? So the landlord, I have nothing to do with your divorce. You can't force me, a third party, to come here and give charity to you, right? So that's nothing to do with me. I might be your friend, I might know you, I might not know you, might be Muslim, might not be Muslim. That's irrelevant. The point is you can't force me to give charity on your behalf, even if it means paying later. You can't force me to do that. This is my property. I have a right to rent it out. You're not paying the rent. You can leave. That's it. Right? So key concept, you can't use deen to wrong people. Right? Oh, I have to be a Jummah so I can park on your drive. You cannot park on my drive. This is my house. This is not public property. You can't just park here and say, oh, but I have to go to Jummah. Jummah does not allow you to wrong me, right? It doesn't allow you to wrong me. You can't do that. So you cannot use a religious obligation to take the rights of somebody else, right? You can't do that. I'm paying you to work 12 hours, okay? And in those 12 hours, right? I'm paying you to work 12 and you have no break. And then you have to pray in the meantime, okay? So I'm paying you to work 12 hours. If I don't allow you to pray, then you have to do qada of that time, right? I'm paying you to work for 60 times 12 minutes, or 12 times 60 minutes. So you have to pray. I can't stop you praying, but you can't expect me to pay you to pray. Does that make sense? So if I, for example, like I'm in Bangladesh, I'm like, yeah, we don't, if you go to Jummah, you're gonna take that off your time. Oh, that's against Islam. No, it's not. Your prayer is between you and Allah. It's not to do with my work, right? So I can't stop you praying, but that doesn't mean I have to pay you to pray. Does that make sense? So many Muslims, they don't understand. They're like, oh, that's bad. Like you're not letting me pray. I'm not stopping you praying. You're just asking me to pay you while you're praying. I'm not going to pay you while you're praying. I'm not obliged to do that. Or pay you while you go to the bathroom. I'm not obliged to do that. So if that's part of the contract, or that's, for example, part of the labor laws of your country, okay. Your country stipulates that you have a right to break. Okay, fine. That's something else. But by default, the default and the deen is I'm paying you per minute. The minutes that you go and do your own things in pray, recite Quran, visit sick person, that's nothing to do with me. I'm not obliged to pay you for that. And so you can't use the deen to force me to do that. Does that make sense? So many Muslims, we use the deen and like family obligations in an abusive way. Like we think it's so important, it's more important than something else. I'll give you another example. I was teaching this kid, okay, I was during COVID online, okay, and I'm talking to him and he's not responding, or he leaves the room. And I said, "Where did you go?" He said, "Oh, my mom was calling me." And I said, "Habibi, may Allah make you an obedient child. When you're in school, when your mum calls you, you can't go." He's like, "What are you talking about? Like, my mum called me. I have to go." So yes, but when you're in school, you can't do that. He's like, "What are you talking about? Like, the sheikh is telling me not listen to my mum. Are you insane?" I said, "Yeah, but what you're doing is you're using the obligation to obey your mother to abuse a school contract, which you can't do. You can't do that. So yes, you have to listen to your mum, but not at the cost of school. You can't do that." So what their person is they're merging things and they don't understand where things go in. So the same thing here, right? There's no Amir. She doesn't have cash. He doesn't have cash. So the ex-husband says, "Hey, can I pay you in 6 months?" He says, "No, I don't want to do that." Right? I don't want to do that. I'm not. You cannot force me to lend money to you or force me to let her stay for free. You can't force me to do that. So she has to leave. Right? So the concept in fiqh is they say it's not really what I was talking about is using religion or religious obligations to harm other people. But the principle in the fiqh they talk about is you can't use darura to harm other people. So your necessity does not take away my rights. So you had to break into my car or break into my house or damage my property for some necessity. That's fine. You still owe me the money though. But I was dying. I know you're not sinful. I'm not angry, but you have to pay for my broken glass. Or I was forced to give you food because you didn't have any food. I had to give that to you, but you have to pay for it. So the fact that you're in duress doesn't mean you can take my money. Right? That doesn't mean you can take my money. That means I have to save you, but that doesn't mean I'm obliged to kind of give up things for you. Okay, let's find a good place. Let's find get the end of this chapter. So it says. So it says Yahya ibn Sa'id informed us from Sa'id Musayyib that he was asked about a woman whose husband divorces her and she is in a rented house. Who's responsible for the rent? He says her husband. Then what if her husband hasn't got it? Then he said, then she's responsible. Then he asked, what if she doesn't have it? He answered, then the responsibility of the Amir. أخبرنا مالك أخبر نافع أن ابن عمر طلق امرأته في مسكن حفصة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وكان طريقه في حجرتها فكان يسلك الطريق الأخرى من أدبار البيوت في المسجد كراهة أن يستأذن عليها حتى راجعها. So this is kind of so Malik informed us from Nafi' informed us that Ibn Umar divorced his wife in the residence of Hafsa, his sister, right, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. And his route to the mosque passed through her house, right, or through her room. And so he would take another route behind the houses to the mosque because he disliked to have to ask her permission to pass through until he took her back, right? So he was talaq raj'i, meaning he divorced her once, and it's like, so now I can't be alone with you, nor can I walk through your room, right? Can't do that. So what did he do? Is he went another route, right? So this is what happens. You got angry and you divorce your wife. I hope you have someone to sleep tonight because you have to leave and she's going to stay, right? So you're going to go to your brother's house, go to your mom's house, go to your dad's house, go somewhere. I don't know, but go to a hotel, something, right? But he didn't even want to walk through her house, right? So in principle, could you be in the same house as your wife, divorce and be in the same house if there's another person there? So it's not khalwa, yeah, in principle, right? But she does have a right to be in a house where there's no person like that, right? So she has a right to a place where that she has privacy, etc. Right? قال محمد وبهذا نأخذ لا ينبغي للمرأة أن تنتقل من منزلها الذي طلقها فيه زوجها وإن كان الطلاق بائنا أو غير بائن أو مات عنها فيه حتى تنقضي عدتها وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهاء and nobody agrees on that anyway. Inshallah we'll come to the iddah of the Walad. Inshallah ta'ala come to this next week. Inshallah ta'ala. Right? So there's many details here. Again, this is not a place to study fiqh. We do not study fiqh like this. Right, this is just kind of main discussions and we see interesting things, but obviously there's a lot of things if you want to study the fiqh of marriage, you study it in a book of fiqh, right? There's not really a book of fiqh per se. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب